you in this room have dieted, other than me? Okay. Keep your hand up if you've dieted more than once. If you've dieted more than twice, put up 2 hands. Here's the thing about dieting. Dieting doesn't work. If it did work, so many of us wouldn't have tortured ourselves endlessly with more and more diets trying to get skinny. It's really a simple fact. It's been researched for years, and in fact they've known this since 1944. So what happened in 1944 was that there was a guy called Ansel Keys, and he took conscientious objectors to the war, and instead of having them fight war, they did research with them. And they halved the amount of calories that they were given to eat. And what happened over a 6-month period is, yes, they lost a lot of weight, but they also became psychologically disturbed. One of them even cut off his finger. Not only that, but in the period following, what do you think happened? Any of you gone off a diet? And then what happens next? What we do is we make up for all the things that we deprived ourselves during the diet. Isn't that so? And when we do that, what happens in our bodies is something quite remarkable. Because when you lose weight, especially on a low-calorie diet, what do you think is the very first thing that you lose from a body composition point of view? Water. The very first thing you lose is water. Now think about how heavy water is on a scale. Okay. So on a scale, you've lost weight and you're going, yay, this is working. But the problem is you only need a drop of 2% in your water to affect your metabolism, to slow down your metabolism. What's the thing you lose next after water? Muscle. Guess what? Does muscle weigh more or less than fat? More. It weighs more. In fact, about 3 times more on a scale than fat does. So, you've lost muscle, which is the biggest component of your metabolism, that keeps your metabolism fast and healthy, and you've lost water, the 2 things that actually speed up your metabolism. And what have you got more of as a percentage of your body weight now that you've lost water and muscle? Fat. So what you've done, effectively, is you have made your body into a better fat storage container than it was before. So when that diet fails you, and did you hear me make a point of the fact that the diet fails you rather than you failing the diet? When the diet fails you, you do what we automatically do after deprivation. We make up for it by eating all the things we thought we couldn't eat, those things that are high in calories and high in fats and high in sugars. So now we have a slowed down metabolism, and plus we're making up for the deprivation. Guess what the result is? More weight. That's why very often you'll go on diet, you'll lose that weight, and then you'll gain it, plus a little bit of interest. Then you'll go on diet again, you'll lose it, you'll gain it, plus a little bit of interest. And that's how we diet ourselves progressively fatter. Does that make sense to everyone? But you see, the diet industry is, in 2012, I haven't been able to get more updated figures than that, which surprises me, was a $20 billion industry. You know those lovely celebrities that endorse products? They get paid on average $33,000 per pound that they have lost to endorse a product. Doesn't that sound like a good thing to do? Maybe I could become a celeb. It's a huge industry, and they are not interested in your health. They are interested in the health of their bottom line. And never forget that, because they show you the before and after pictures. Have you ever noticed what they do to those pictures? The before pictures are kind of a little grey, unsmiling, taken in the most unflattering positions. The after pictures, smiling, very happy, a little bit of photographic trickery being done.
And they're always tanner.
And what?
They always have a better tan.
And they always have a better tan. She's noticed it. But they don't show you the after pictures. Now, you know all these TV programs like, what's that one about Biggest Loser? Follow up on those people's histories and see what's happened to them after the show. Because you know they did a fascinating study where they took rats and they put them on what's known as DR, dietary restriction. So they restricted the amount of calories they could eat. They lost weight. The control group was eating normally. Then they allowed them to eat normally. In other words, exactly what the control group had been eating all the time. And they gained weight, but they went past the weight of the control mice that had only ever been eating the same food. They put those same mice back on a diet, and then they let them eat normally again. Note what the control group has been eating all the time. They again gained and overtook. And what they noticed is that with each cycle, these rats or mice, they lost weight slower and they gained it back faster. And that's because we are changing our metabolism at a very basic level. You know, have any of you women noticed that men seem to lose weight frustratingly faster than women? Here's the reason. Men have a bigger fat-burning machine than what we do. What do I mean by that? They have a vastly higher percentage of body muscle than what women do. Naturally. It's part of their system. So, you know, we starve ourselves and we do this, all they have to do is just chop out a beer or two. Before you know it, they're dropping pounds and you're like, yeah, this is terrible. But you know, diets are a fascinating thing. So tell me, what day of the week do diets always start? They start on a Monday. You are a perfect audience. They start on a Monday, and there's a very good reason why diets start on a Monday. I'm going to share it with you. It's because we need the weekend to prepare for all the things that are never ever going to pass our lips ever again from Monday. So what do? We prepare and we prepare. Come Monday, we are all eager. Yes, I'm ready for this. Monday, hey, this is going great. Tuesday, it's going okay. Wednesday, this is getting a little tougher. By Thursday, have you noticed that what you're allowed to eat fits onto a rollerblade and what you're not allowed to eat fits onto a 10-ton truck? And then you drive past the Kentucky Fried sign and it grows wings and goes, Kentucky, eat me, eat me, eat me. And next thing you know, your car's like, ooh, Kentucky. And then, of course, we chastise ourselves and beat ourselves up terribly. And then we're going to start the next diet again, of course, on Monday. And so we have this revolving diet calendar. So I wanted to share with you that diets don't work, they cannot work, it's impossible for them to work. So there are other ways to be healthy that have nothing to do with dieting. And I want to share some of the reasons that I honestly believe that we can be healthy at a far greater range of weight than what we are ever told in the media. Because there's a lot of money to be made by keeping us feeling insecure and unhealthy. I mean, honestly, when I look back at my pictures of when I thought I was fat and revolting and just had to diet because, my God, I was going to die, I was actually quite skinny. Have any of you done that? Look back at your pictures when you dieted and thought, what was I thinking? I mean, I'm a survivor of anorexia, exercise, bulimia. You know, when I was 15, a boyfriend told me that he thought I looked great in a bikini. Well, I took one look at myself in the mirror and went, man, this dude's blind, and when he sees me again, he's clearly going to see that he's mistaken. So I went on a diet. And you know what? I cut my weight to 21 kilograms from 50 kilograms. I competed with a friend of mine called Janet to see who could lose the most weight and be the skinniest. Do you know what shocked me? Janet died. Janet died because I was competing with her to see who could be the thinnest. Dieting isn't this nebulous thing. It's not unharmful. Dieting is the start of every bit of anorexia you will ever come across. If you don't start dieting, you can't get anorexia. It's as simple as that. Dieting leads to binge eating, it leads to binge eating disorders, it leads to poor self-esteem, and you know what? There is not good evidence that shows that dieting either helps you have the weight kept off, or that it's actually healthy to be skinnier in the long term. And I'm going to share some of that research with you. But first I want to tell you a story. How many of you know what BMI is, body mass index? So we go to the doctor. How many of you go to the doctor or have been to the doctor with your heart trembling a little because you know they're going to tell you to lose weight? And if they don't, if you know that in your head you're saying, I know he's going to think I'm too fat. What do you think you're doing to your body in the moment that you're thinking that? Do you think that perhaps your blood pressure's going up? No. That maybe your heart's beating a little faster and a little more incoherently? Do you think your brain's changing? All of those things are happening. And you know, the interesting thing is, those are the very same symptoms of heart disease. Doesn't that make you think? So the reason that I believe BMI is not something that is accurate or that we should ever use is for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it was created in 1830 by a Belgian statistician called Adolphe Quetelet. It was never ever standardized for individual humans. It was actually designed to measure the collective weight of large populations. But that's not the only problem with BMI. The problem with BMI is that it relies on weight and height. Now remember what we said about muscle, that muscle weighs a lot more than fat does on a scale. So I want to tell you a story about my sister. My sister's 5'7" and she weighs 62 kilograms, which I don't know what that is in pounds. But recently she had her insurance company send her for one of these little sort of checkups, right? Where they take your height and your weight and they ask you a few questions. So one of the questions they ask her is, do you do any exercise? She said yes. They said regularly. She said yeah, pretty regularly. My sister is much taller and skinnier than me, but let me tell you, she's a world-class squash champion. Now, if any of you know squash, it's like racquetball. It's very fast. You move around the court at huge speeds. She does something like 20 hours of exercise a week. Okay? So this woman who's doing her little test gets quieter and quieter because, first of all, she's now overweight. In fact, she's clinically obese, according to the scale. And as this person says to her, you're at risk for heart disease, diabetes, a stroke. She said, we really need to do something urgently about your weight. And she said, I would suggest you go on a diet to lose weight. And she said, the other thing we need to do is to start getting you to be a little bit more active. So Laura said, well, what have you got in mind? So she says, look, we don't want to do anything too extreme. You're really at a very high risk for these diseases. What I want you to do is, I think you should start walking about 3 times a week, but for no more than 20 minutes. Now, fortunately, Laura's a pretty savvy person. She knew instantly that this was nonsense. But how many people don't know that it's nonsense? I mean, Tom Cruise is clinically obese according to his BMI. And those of you who are Clint Eastwood fans, in his heyday, he was also obese for his BMI. So it just shows you that there are some problems with it. But that's not the biggest problem with it. The biggest problem is far more sinister than that. And I'm going to share that with you today. So I've been researching weight for 16 years. That's what I wrote my books on. And one of the studies that I came across was done by Professor Linda Bacon. She had a really interesting chart in her research that just fascinated me, and I'm going to share it with you. Okay, this is the chart of increasing obesity over the years, starting in 1950, as plotted on a graph. Is there anything about this that stands out to you as being a little peculiar?
Huge jump in 1980s.
There's a huge jump. Good job. Let me tell you about that jump. How does it happen that 29 million Americans go to bed one night as normal weight and wake up the next morning and they are overweight? And if they were overweight, they woke up the next morning and they were obese. How does that happen? So I interviewed Linda Bacon, and I wanted to understand what happened. And this was in June 1998. Remember that date because it's a date we're going to revisit in a short while. Now, that was the year after Linda Bacon had just finished doing her PhD. And for her PhD, what she did was she studied large epidemiological studies and population groups to find out at which weight do people live the longest. Now, wouldn't you think that that would be the weight that would be normal weight? Can we agree on that? At the end of all of her studies, she came to the conclusion that actually our BMI rates were too high. We were getting fat at a category sooner than what we should if it was based on longevity and mortality rates. So her recommendation in her PhD dissertation was that our BMI rates needed to shift a category. So she gave all her research to her supervisor, who happened to be on the obesity task force that advised the government. And they had a summit coming up with the government. And not long after the summit, in fact in June 1998, all of a sudden the BMI tables switched in exactly the opposite way than what Linda had recommended. And she was like, whoa. So she went to her supervisor and she said, you were on the task force, how can this happen? And her supervisor said to her, we presented all of your research, but we were overridden by the International Obesity Task Force. Linda thought, who are they? So given that she knew her data so well, she thought, I've got to find out who these people are and what research, what data they're basing this decision on. Guess what she found? It was made up of members of 2 pharmaceutical companies that had weight loss drugs on the market at the time. They did 3 things at that meeting. First of all, they moved the BMI rates in exactly the opposite direction than what they should go. Secondly, they persuaded the government to classify obesity as a disease, which meant that they could write prescriptions that would be paid by healthcare. And in the next few years, they wrote something like 60 million prescriptions for weight loss drugs. But they also went to the American Heart Association. And in June 1998, with no more evidence than what they had always had, the American Heart Association saw that the government had reclassified obesity as a disease, and suddenly they said heart attacks are caused by obesity. And so the course of history was changed in very remarkable ways. Now it's interesting, but the 2 companies that had those weight loss drugs, ever heard of ephedra? Ever heard of fen-phen? Fen-phen was banned. Ephedra you can still get, but the interesting thing is that in 2008, the co-owner of Metabolife, which was the company that put ephedra on the market, was actually jailed for hiding adverse effects of this drug from the FDA. And I hate to say it, but if you think the FDA protects us, nah, not so much. There are some lobbyists and very powerful people that have a lot more say than we do. So BMI is nothing that we can rely on. And you know, the problem is that not only we have two sides of the weight debate. One of them is that if you are skinnier, you will look better. Because look at all the images we see. Do you ever see people like me on the TV? No. What do we see on the TV? Tall, skinny, usually blonde.
Yeah.
What do we see with guys? Guys are a little different because they have a lot more to their beauty than what women do. They have a lot more latitude than what we do. So the problem is that over the years we become convinced that we can only be lovable, gorgeous, find someone who loves us if we look a certain way. That's part of the problem. And then the other side is that we get convinced that we can only be healthy when we are skinny. But let me share some data with you that may surprise you. Catherine Flagel is the head researcher at the CDC. In 2007, she did an enormous study. Her conclusion was that the top 6 most obese people and the bottom 11% of skinny people actually had the highest mortality rates. And in fact, the skinny people had higher mortality rates than the even grossly obese people did. Dr. Claudia Kawas, who does the 90+ study down in California, who's looked at 6,500 people who have lived beyond the age of 90, said they didn't have huge things in common. There were a few things that she mentioned, but one of them that she mentioned that stood out to me because of my research was that people who would be considered overweight at age 70 were very often amongst that group. Dr. Mario Martinez, who wrote the Mind-Body Code and who has interviewed over 500 centenarians, that's people who lived to 100, around the globe. He wrote a fantastic article in the National Geographic a few years, said that one of the things is that people who live that long are often quite chunky, as he put it. And there was actually a study done in 2003. It was a 12-year study, and I can't remember it. It's something about the retirement group that they did it in. And what they found is that people who would be considered overweight between the ages of 51 and 77 would actually have the longest longevity. A bit of fat is a health reserve. As you get older, you know people that are tiny and then they have one thing go wrong and they develop a terrible illness and they never recover because they don't have any reserves. They lose a lot of weight and they struggle to gain it again. And the problem that you'll see quite commonly is that people, when they do research with centenarians, now remember there's a natural wastage of muscle as we get older. So they do this research with centenarians, and by the time they're 100, most of them are very tiny because of that muscle weight. So you've got to look back a few years and say what correlates with longevity in your earlier years. So I'm not saying go out and get fat, but I am saying stop fearing fat the way that we do. Because when you fear it, you do a couple of things. You first of all upset your levels of various hormones in your body. One of them is ghrelin, which tells you when you're hungry. So it tricks you into thinking you're hungrier than what you are. The other one is leptin, which has to do with your satiety. It tells you when you're full. And it upsets that one as well. So your body can't tell you as well when it's full. But the most dangerous one that it upsets is cortisol. How many of you know what cortisol does?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, exactly. Cortisol, if you look it up, is known as the death hormone. Okay? And what it does is fear increases your levels of cortisol that you have in your body. So all of those things together degrade your health. And in fact, there was one fascinating study that was done where they looked at the stress of being on diet. I mean, come on, those of you who've been on dieters, is it stressful? Counting calories, worrying about micronutrients. They found that the little DNA telomeres, which are like the plastic caps on the end of your shoelaces, which keep your chromosomes from unraveling, every time they divide, those little caps get a tiny bit shorter. But what they found is that the stress of dieting reduces the length of those telomeres so that you can actually lose something between, I think it was 7 and 19 years, depending on your stress levels. So here we are thinking we're dieting and losing weight to be healthier, but we're not taking the whole picture into account. So when I was writing the first book that I wrote, which is called The Mind Over Fatter Program, and I'm going to give one of these away later on, this was really about intuitive eating. But it was written way before intuitive eating was actually introduced. And it was while I was doing the research for this book that I started getting this inkling of, this just doesn't add up. I kept bumping into some fascinating research that really made me question, is a fat the health ogre that it's made out to be? The first study that I came across was one that was done in 1980, and it was done by the Royal College of London. But it was done with an interesting population group. It was a population group that I was very au fait with. I knew this population group well. It was done with rural South African women. Now, I grew up amongst rural South African black women. And the interesting thing was, what this research found was that they did not have all the health problems, despite being way larger than what they should have been. The interesting thing, though, was that their conclusion was that they should lose weight. And I was like, well, that just makes no sense. I mean, if they're perfectly healthy, why would you advise them to lose weight? And that's because the story about weight being this ogre grows its own wings and horns. And it made me think, because to be fat in the black world in rural Africa means something totally different than it means here. It means you're fertile. It means you're a good wife material. It means you are beautiful. You are honored and revered for your beauty if you are large. And that got me thinking, because I thought about how when you feel honored and revered, what does that do to you at a biological level? It increases all your great endorphins like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, all the things that are health enhancing for your body. Then in the course of writing this book, I went down to go and interview Dr. Joanne Akida at Berkeley University. And she said this to me, which really made me think. She said, Carrie, think about sumo wrestlers. How many of you have seen pictures of sumo wrestlers? Large, right? They eat up to 6,000 calories a day. And yet, all of their triglycerides, everything, they are metabolically healthy. She said that shows you that if you're fit, you can also be fat and you can be healthy. And I thought about that. And I said to her, but yes, later on when they give up the exercise, doesn't that cause problems? And she said, for some, but not for all. So I went and studied this group of sumo wrestlers a little bit more intently. And you know what? They had the same thing as these African women. Sumo wrestlers in their culture are honored and revered and thought of as real men and pursued by thousands of women. But when they stop fighting, what do you think happens? You know, they step out of the limelight and all that warm praise and love and acceptance disappears. And yes, at the same time, if they're not doing the same amount of exercise, their body is changing muscle into fat, and the combination maybe leads to health problems. I'm also not saying that our body likes to be huge from a joint point of view. You know, that's another aspect completely. But I don't see a single person in this room that couldn't be healthy at the weight that they are. I also came across another study that was done that really spoke volumes to me. What they did is they took women who had diabetes and hypertension that were in a similar age, and they monitored how many sick days they took. And their conclusion was that their comfort levels in their own body, in other words, their body esteem, was way more important to their health and how many sick days they took than their weight per se. So in other words, you could have skinny women. If one hated her body and one was okay with her body, the one who hated her body would take more sick days. You could have two fat women, and the one that had a healthy body esteem had fewer sick days. It just makes you think. You know that the Inuits up in Greenland are healthier than the Danes at every fatness level. Why? You see, and what I love doing in my research is looking at things that stand in opposition to what we are always told is the truth and saying, you know, what makes the difference? If the Danes are always less healthy than the Inuits, no matter their body size, then it's not about body size. There's something else that's standing in the way. By the time I wrote this book, which was my next book that was commissioned by the publisher, I really did have a sense that how we feel about ourselves is much more important than our physicality itself, because it changes our biochemistry at a molecular level. And Oprah magazine actually printed the one chapter from this book that actually sets that out. Now, I didn't give the publishers permission to publish it in America or Canada, but you can get this book via Amazon. It's called The Joy-Filled Body. Joy-filled, F-I-L-L-E-D, body. So, I just want you to think beyond the story that we are always told. You know, it doesn't matter how many times you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. If we're always told the same story, we always believe the same things, it's time to open our minds and think about, is there a different way of looking at this? Is there some evidence that I haven't taken into account that would make a difference? Because what difference would it make to you if you lived comfortably in your own body? If you didn't look at the scale and have it ruin your whole day? I can't tell you how many days I had ruined by the scale. I can't tell you how many weeks I had ruined by the scale. How many months, how many years, and how many decades. I spent 3 decades hating myself. In fact, I have a picture, the same picture that I put up when I started the diet that got me anorexia. And I hated myself so much that I actually tore my head off the picture, all because of some external idea that I wasn't acceptable as I am. I want to tell you that we are all beautiful. Every single solitary one of you. We are all worthy of love. We can all be healthy. But we do need to be active. There is really good research that shows that body size doesn't matter, but how active you are and how fit you are does matter. There's also really good evidence that you don't have to lose an ounce and you can still gain health. So in 2002, Dr. Linda Bacon, the same person whose data I shared with you there, did a really fascinating research study where she took a group of dieters and a group of non-dieters. And for 2 years, the group of dieters dieted. They, of course, lost weight and then put it back on, and lost weight and put it back on. The other group didn't diet at all. All they did was focus on changing their perception of themselves. They changed their self-esteem, they changed their metabolic health, and they took better care of themselves than the dieters. And those dieters had none of those health benefits. There was another study that just really made me curious. And this was a study that showed that when people reached their goal weight, their diabetes disappeared. But they only had to gain back 5% of their lost weight. 5%! For all their diabetic symptoms to return. Why? I mean, is that really a body thing? Because here's my hypothesis. What happens when we lose weight? What does everybody say to us?
You look good.
Oh, you look great. You look fantastic. How did you do it? So you become an expert on sharing your knowledge. But every time you look in the mirror, you're hearing all those voices. So you're finding it easier to honor and revere yourself in that body. What happens though when you jump on that scale and you're realizing you're starting to gain that weight again? Stress. And immediately. And so stress is a much better predictor of diabetes, for example, than body sizes. You get thin diabetics and you get fat diabetics. You don't only get fat diabetics. So don't just accept what you get and take it and say, this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's not always like that. For years and years, we were told that smoking is a health measure, weren't we? It relaxed you, it did all those good things. And then we started discovering, well, maybe not so much. So cultural stories change over time. In the Rubenesque era, people thought that larger people were more beautiful. Then when Twiggy came along, oh my gosh, well then skinny was beautiful. We can create our own little culture inside our head. We can accept ourselves no matter what. I want you to focus on loving yourself, living a full and vibrant life. I want you to feel energetic in your body. Because there's no doubt to me that I feel less healthy when I'm sitting on a couch all day. There's absolutely no doubt that I come to yoga, I get to laugh with Angie, tickle a few toes, and I leave feeling better, not just because of my friends, the fact that I've tickled a few toes, but also because I've moved my blood around, I've strengthened my muscles, I've done something. I play pickleball, and I know that I'm healthier when I leave pickleball than when I arrived. Outside of very thin and very large extremes, you can be healthy at every size, so long as you stay active. You aren't forever stressed about your body and stressed about everything that you're eating. Let me tell you, one of the biggest predictors of longevity is keeping an active mind and keeping an active body. And I'm going to add to that, being in love with yourself and being in love with life. Are there any questions? No. Yes.